Your best friend is older than language. Not your specific best friend, obviously, they're probably about your age, but the concept of the best friend, the ride or die, the person who saves you the last piece of whatever counts as food is at least 100,000 years old. And you, right now, are living with Stone Age social software running in your chest. Let's talk about Grug. You are Grug. You live on the African savanna somewhere around 70,000 years ago. You have a spear, a very bad haircut, and absolutely no idea what tomorrow looks like. There are lions. There are rival groups of humans who are also, frankly, a lot. There are cliffs, rivers, broken bones, bad berries, and at least 3 weather events that have no name yet because nobody has invented the concept of complaining about weather. You are, statistically speaking, one bad afternoon away from becoming a problem that solves itself. So here is the question. Did you have a best friend? And did it actually matter? Because the answer is yes, deeply yes, and the evidence for it is sitting in a museum right now in the form of a seashell that traveled 500 kilometers for absolutely no practical reason whatsoever. First, let's set the scene properly, because people tend to imagine prehistoric life as either a cartoon with wooden clubs or a grim nature documentary where everyone is covered in mud and dying quietly. The truth is both funnier and more interesting than either of those. Grug's world was genuinely dangerous in ways that are hard to overstate. The average prehistoric human lifespan, measured to adulthood, was not as short as the famous statistics make it sound, because those numbers are dragged down by absolutely catastrophic infant mortality. If Grug made it to age 15, Grug had a reasonable shot at 40 or even 50, but getting to 15 was the hard part. And even after that, the margin for error was basically zero. Break your arm. Congratulations, you are now a snack for a wolf. Get a bad infection. Nobody has invented anything about that yet. Trip over a rock at the wrong moment. The rock wins. Every single day of Grug's life was a negotiation with a universe that was not particularly interested in Grug's continued participation. And here is where it gets interesting. Because when you live inside that kind of pressure cooker, the math of survival changes completely. Your kin, your blood relatives, are your first safety net. But kin can die. Kin can leave. Kin can have a very bad week all at the same time. What Grug needed, what every prehistoric human needed, was a redundant system, a backup. Someone who was not obligated by genetics to care whether Grug ate today, but who chose to anyway. That choice, that specific, irrational, generous choice, is what archaeologists are now finding baked into the fossil record in ways that are genuinely beautiful and also, let's be honest, kind of hilarious in how much effort they involved. Here is the seashell thing, because it is my favorite evidence and it deserves its own moment. Archaeologists working across multiple sites in prehistoric Africa and Europe have found ornamental objects, beads, shells, carved pendants, pigments, things with no survival value whatsoever, that came from sources hundreds of kilometers away from where they were buried. One specific shell bead type found at sites in North Africa has been traced back to coastal sources roughly 500 kilometers from the inland sites where it was deposited. 500 kilometers, on foot, carrying things, through terrain that was actively trying to kill you. That shell did not walk to that site because somebody needed a shell to survive. That shell walked to that site because somebody wanted to give somebody else something. That is a gift. That is a gift economy. And gift economies, as anthropologists have documented exhaustively across both ancient and modern small-scale societies, are how you build and maintain alliances that extend beyond your immediate family. Grug did not carry a shell 500 kilometers because he was bored. Grug carried a shell 500 kilometers because someone on the other end of that trip mattered to Grug. And before you say, that is just trade, yes, sometimes it was trade. But trade with who? With strangers you might never see again. No, trade that spans that kind of distance in a world with no roads, no maps, and no GPS requires a relationship. It requires trust. It requires someone on the other end who is glad you showed up alive. But here is the crazy part. The gift networks are only the beginning. Because when archaeologists started looking at burial sites, they found something that completely changed how we think about prehistoric social bonds. Bodies buried together that were not related, not genetically, not by blood. You can tell because ancient DNA analysis has gotten remarkably good in the last 20 years. And when you sequence the genomes of people buried side by side, sometimes with their hands overlapping, sometimes with grave goods suggesting a shared identity, and find out they share no significant genetic relationship, you have to ask a new question. Why are these two people here together? The answer that keeps coming up is the same answer a 10-year-old would give you if you asked them why they wanted to sit next to their best friend at the school lunch table. Because they belong together. Because whoever was making the decision about where these people rested chose to keep them close. That is not family obligation. That is something else. That is something that has a very specific name, and it gets better, or worse, depending on how you feel about the universe having opinions. Because some of the most striking evidence for prehistoric friendship is not about gifts or burials at all. It is about injury care. Specifically, it is about the fact that archaeologists have found prehistoric human remains showing healed injuries that should have been, by any reasonable standard, fatal. Healed femur fractures, healed skull fractures, healed injuries to the spine. These are not injuries you recover from alone in the wilderness. A broken femur means you cannot walk, cannot hunt, cannot gather, cannot move away from predators. A broken femur in the prehistoric world is a death sentence unless someone else decides, completely against their own immediate survival interests, to stay with you, feed you, protect you, and wait the 6 to 8 weeks it takes for a femur to heal enough to bear weight. Someone did that, repeatedly, across multiple sites, multiple time periods, multiple continents. Someone looked at Grug lying there with a broken leg and instead of doing the logical thing, decided that Grug was worth the trouble. That is not a transaction. That is not genetic obligation if the DNA does not match. That is a choice. A choice that cost real resources and real risk and was made anyway because the relationship was worth more than the math. Now, not all prehistoric friendships were, let's say, elegantly handled, because Grug was also working with a brain that was running several background programs that do not always play nicely with the friendship software. Grug's brain was also running threat assessment, resource competition, and something that modern researchers politely call coalitionary aggression, which is the technical term for getting a group together and going to have a very bad conversation with the neighboring group. And the evidence for that is also in the fossil record, sitting right next to the evidence for gift giving and injury care, which really does capture something true about human nature. We are simultaneously the animal most capable of loyalty and self-sacrifice toward people we chose to love, and the animal most capable of organized hostility toward people we decided were not in that category. Grug contained multitudes. Grug still does. You are Grug. Here is something that tends to surprise people. The size of the friendship network was not random. Robin Dunbar, a British anthropologist who deserves a lot more famous name recognition than he has, spent years studying the relationship between brain size and social group size across primates, and found something remarkable. The size of the neocortex, the thinking part of the brain, tracks almost perfectly with the average social group size of the species. For humans, the number he calculated was about 150. That is Dunbar's number. 150 people is roughly the cognitive limit of a social group you can maintain meaningful relationships with. And nested inside that group of 150 is a smaller circle of about 50 close friends, a smaller circle of about 15 people you really depend on, and at the very center, somewhere between 3 and 5 people who are your core, your ride or die, your best friends. Grug had approximately 4 best friends and about 46 other people he would help move a couch for, which is, if you think about it, exactly how your social life works right now. The numbers in your phone have a Dunbar structure whether you planned it that way or not. You inherited this from a brain that was built for savanna politics in a world without phones, and it is still running the same software, just with different apps on top. The ancient care networks also did something that we almost never talk about when we talk about evolution, which is that they made previously unviable lives viable. The healed injury evidence is extraordinary on its own, but researchers have also found remains suggesting the survival of individuals with congenital conditions, developmental differences, or early-onset disabilities that would have made independent survival essentially impossible. Someone kept those people alive, not because they were genetically obligated to, not because there was a system in place requiring it, but because within a small, tight social group with functioning friendship bonds, the value of a person is not simply their ability to contribute calories to the group that week. That is a modern insight being confirmed by a 200,000-year-old skeleton, and I think that is one of the genuinely good things the fossil record has to tell us. So next time you send a meme to your best friend at 2 in the morning for no reason other than it made you think of them, congratulations. You are participating in a social technology that is older than agriculture, older than writing, older than the wheel. You are doing the shell bead thing. You are saying, across whatever distance, I thought of you and I wanted you to know. Grug did that. Grug did that with a shell and 500 kilometers of very dangerous terrain, and zero guarantee that anyone on the other end was having a good day. Your friendship is a survival mechanism that has been road-tested for 100,000 years. It worked then. The evidence is in the ground. It is still working now. That is Grug Explains for today. If this made you want to know what else Grug was quietly getting right about how to be human, there is a lot more where that came from. Stick around. Grug has opinions on sleep, on food, on medicine, on the concept of a really bad idea that everyone agreed to anyway. The past is stranger and warmer and funnier than anyone told you. Let's keep going.